Johnny Fontana, Real World NF Scorpio, back with another video. Today's going to be a different video, right? Today we're going to discuss the differences between living in Tampa and Las Vegas. Now, fair warning now. This is not a video for the censors, meaning that the difference between a censor and an intuitive feeler, an introvert, we deal internally, right? The intuitive types, the analytical types versus the sensors. For them, they deal with the sensory elements. So by that I mean, I've been doing a lot of research, right? Even prior to me moving to Vegas, and now I'm in Tampa, hence the new setup, right? Some of you know that I moved to Tampa recently. I've been doing a lot of research, and just naturally, you know how we do, right? We do research, and even to the point where we think we got it. It's like, let me just read that one more paragraph, read that one more book just to quench our work in theory, right? But doing that research, I've noticed that the majority of these videos are surrounded by, or the majority of these videos contain sensory elements. And I think it's most likely due to the fact that the majority, or I would say a good portion of the people online, just deal within the social sensory norms, as opposed to our types, right? The intuitives, the introverted feelers. We sort of internalize things, right? We're in our heads. So a lot of the sensory items, such as the top 5 reasons that one would move or choose not to move to Tampa, would be because of the beach, the traffic, the weather, the bugs, right? The hurricanes. Those issues are more along the lines of sensory elements because, again, you sense, you see bugs, traffic, versus for us, we more so internalize items. So for me, traffic is not an issue. On the contrary, I actually don't mind traffic. When I was living in D.C., prior to getting to work, that 45-minute commute, 45 to an hour commute in traffic, which would normally take 20 minutes, it allowed me to sort of game plan, right? Game plan my head. Again, I'm not a planner, but again, I like to envision things, right? So it allowed me to envision, my day, to figure out what was going to happen. Not plan out the details, but the big picture, like what was my day going to look like. And after work, because of all that stimulation, it allowed me to decompress. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I not speaking about the differences yet? Because again, this is not a sensory video where I just go for the sensory topics. This is more setting up for what is to come, providing context, so then from there I can fill in the details. So just bear with me, right? So that being said, if you've watched my previous video with regards to how to understand the energies of a city, it's basically by where intuitives, the more analytical types, right, the introverts, I believe, need to expose themselves to a lot of different experiences, cultures, people, things, and so forth and so on. And again, it's because of me having gone through these experiences and now becoming older, I'm now better understanding and having more aha moments, but more profound aha moments. Meaning that because we are the extroverted feelers, right? So we understand energies. We can sort of now experience whatever it is before us and then internalize that then when we move, when we go somewhere else, when we experience something else, we can then be able to recall that experience based on our introverted thinking, and sort of come to that aha moment. Be like, now I see. But again, that aha moment comes through experiences of you internalizing and experiencing these things. Again, I'm not teaching you things that you don't know. I'm just providing context, okay? Again, for what is to come. So essentially, it's like reading a book. Wherever you move somewhere, because we're talking about living spaces, right, between Tampa and Vegas. Whenever you move somewhere, just like I've said previously in my other video, it's like watching a movie, watching a TV show, reading a book. Even with Netflix. Let's take Netflix, for example, because it's the most common way to stream and watch videos without commercials. You're watching a series and you're binging. But there's always that moment where it comes to like a more settled moment where it's like the intensity rises, and then all of a sudden it comes to like a point, like a breaking point where it's like, okay, now I think this is a perfect time for me to pause it, go use the bathroom, go get some snack, take the kids to bed, and then return, right? Same as with a book. You're reading the book, you're engaged in the book, and then you decide, okay, next chapter, I'm going to set it down, reach over for my cup of water, my glass of tea, or what have you, and then you realize, oh, that tea is cold, I need to warm it up. It's the same thing with your living spaces, right? You have what I called preconditioned blur often. The preconditioned blur is like the preconditioned notion of what you believe things are to be. Again, especially as intuitive types and INFJs, we have this habit of like thinking, like what they say, you're psychic because you knew what was going to happen. No, a lot of times it's a guessing game, right? Just based on, again, connecting dots, and we just sort of, a lot of the times we're correct because, again, we've experienced these things and we can sort of guess. But a lot of the times we have a preconditioned blur because, again, it goes back to that preconditioned notion of what is to be. And then when you arrive, you realize, oh, that's really not how things are. But as I said before, as you get older, what goes from preconditioned blur to now having an understanding of what is to be, as you get older, it becomes to, oh, now I know, as opposed to just thinking, oh, this is what's going to happen. You get involved in a situation. Oh, well, you know what? That's not what I thought it was going to be. Now because you've gotten older, more experiences, you're more in tune, you have more profound thoughts. It's like, now I know it's why that happened. And then you become like, you know what? And then you start to dwell on it versus before where it was just like, oh, I didn't realize that. It's just something new, something different. Again, you still accept it, you're receptive to it, but now it's a little bit more like, I see. So that's what happened to me in Tampa. Now we're sort of getting into the, Now we're getting into the differences between the two different cities. Tampa, I had a absolute major preconditioned blur. The reason why is because I used to live down south, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, Broward County. But still, when I moved to DC from Florida, I left under poor circumstances, meaning that the economy was poor. Job conditions were just like horrendous, just because of the crisis. So I ended up moving to DC for better working conditions and just a better life for my family. Now, having come back to Tampa now, up north, it's like you're thinking, it's going to be different, it's not as monocultural as down south, which is a little bit more centralized in terms of the Caribbean, Latin culture, right? And I'm thinking, okay, there's gonna be more diversity. Okay, fine. So I arrived here, and immediately I'm like, I had two feelings. One was like, wow, I am impressed by the integration of people, meaning that I found that working classes mixed well and integrated well with white collar classes, right? So you would go to any dingy restaurant and you would see Mercedes-Benz, you would see Honda Accords, you would see everyone black and white. You'd go to some like some really, 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 really ratchet neighborhood, and you see college girl walking her poodle, and you're like, oh, okay, right? So again, these sort of, but in DC, no, like everything is sort of separated by class. It's like certain areas you just don't go, because only certain people, are or reside in those areas. Versus here, it doesn't matter. Neighborhood, people live together, and it's great, well integrated. And that's one of the things I observed, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So, again, that's something to think about. Moving to Tampa. However, I also did sense that there was no identity. Like, I sort of, how like usually in the past, or sometimes when you're reading a book, you're just so engaged and you'll just go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chapters without putting it down. Well, here I was getting a little too anxious. So after the second chapter, I started to like put it down because I was just like, something's not there. I'm trying to figure it out. What's going on? Because it didn't sit right with me. Even though like the first I was engaged, I was like, oh, okay, this is a great book. But then it was like, something is missing. Now, not on the contrary, it pains me to say, or even to discuss this issue in terms of me not really sort of identifying with Tampa, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with Tampa. Nothing, as far as I'm concerned. I would highly recommend Tampa to anyone. You see what I'm saying to you? But again, these are some of the underlying issues that I think is not brought to light, and not everyone experiences. Again, these are not deal breakers, but we're just having a deep discussion, right, in terms of what to expect and so forth and so on. It doesn't mean not to move here. It just means that these are the certain things that you're going to have to come to. So I'm just basically providing you this because I've done the hard work. Again, because I'm that person, I'm the INFJ that I'll go in. I'm like the recon guy, right? I go in and then I'll expose myself to all of this stuff and get all taxed and what have you. And then I'll come back and be like, oh, hey, here's what I found out. This is what I've learned, right? So you don't have to go through it. So this is what I'm doing for you. Doesn't necessarily mean that, you're going to have to stay away from Tampa. It just means that I can't put my finger on it. I'm doing that for you. So I finally was like, man, I got to figure, like, something is up there. And I started doing research. You know how we do research. And then, again, I came to find out through articles and through, online forums that Tampa seems to be relatively new in terms of its growing as a major city. You see what I'm saying to you? Because I believe I was reading somewhere that initially Tampa was not built to be a major city. So now the city itself is putting a lot of money into it, into the metropolitan areas and all that stuff, and that's why it's sort of booming, unlike it was maybe just 10 years ago. You see what I'm saying to you? That being said, I've also experienced what I would call like a local culture feel from Tampa. Again, not that it's a bad thing. I'm just providing a perspective. But it's funny because when I went online and I asked this question, and I guess it's like that with every city, but Tampa seems to be very protective. DC is just like that. DC is very protective. And I find that, again, remember we talked about getting older and having all these profound ideas and understanding, because again, it wasn't until that I gotten older in my early mid-30s that I realized how cities functions, not from the sensory in terms of like the way that the design, right? Not in terms of the design, the layout, but in terms, not from like an engineering perspective, but more from a social understanding why and how people conform to a particular city based on city ordinances, city policies, in order to govern, and then thereby making people conform to how they want the city. You know what I'm saying to you? And so I started to notice that there's some similarities between Tampa and DC, because when I was in DC, I didn't understand why DC was the way it was. But then you would always hear online about, oh, DC, we want to be on par with other world-class cities. And, the Wharf and the MGM Grand at the in Maryland somewhere, I forget what you call it, but constantly just building, right? Because it wasn't like that previously. So there tends to be this sort of sense of like, we're on the come up. But an effect of that, a social effect of that, is people then become very protective, right? And I've noticed that people would get so angry whenever you would mention something about how DC is so the button-up culture, and it's why are you guys always using the word hip, and why would you even mention the fact that DC is now becoming cool because Obama is in office? Like, if you're cool, you're cool. You don't have to mention that. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying to you? But nonetheless, it's like Tampa has it's not as bad as DC, because again, the people who live here aren't as, elitist as there isn't that sense of elitism as there is in DC. However, this is more from a more local culture, homey protectiveness, right? And so I go online and I ask a question, because again, I'm in the music industry and so forth and so on, DJing, and I've always asked, as I was doing research, like, why aren't there so many different artists, and major, who come to Tampa? Again, I'm not saying that they don't, but it seems as if there's a lot of flyover between Orlando and crosstalk between Orlando and Miami, right? And I was just met with like pitchforks. People were like, I even mentioned, I refer to Tampa as being, her and so forth. How dare you refer to Tampa as a female? I mean, like, people were just gunning for me. And all I wanted to know was like, dude, like, why is it that Tampa and Orlando speak more, and that Tampa seems to be, Miami and Orlando tend to to speak more, and in Miami and Orlando speak more, and Tampa seems to be out there. And obviously, because of the 75, the route, and all that stuff, I get it. But still, I was just so surprised by that. That being said, living in South Florida, and then now living here, and living on the West Coast in Vegas, I've now come to better understand not only the energies of cities, but also the gravitational pulls, right? And the cross flow of energies between bordering states. Again, this information is not to be like, here's this, here's that, here's this. This is context. Everything that I provide is context and perspective so that you can then connect your own dots based on your own experiences and come to that aha moment and then provide it and sort of advertise it, within your own immediate spaces. It's not to be like, here you go. This is the answer. This is the answer. It's more so of like, hey, here's the perspective. Here's the bigger picture. Now you fill in the details based on your personal experiences. That being said, I painted the dots, or I connected the dots rather, when living in Vegas. And that's when I came to understand, because I was trying to figure out, especially in the music DJ industry, and it's a very good music, or the hospitality business is good because you start to understand, like in terms of like seasons, traffic, foot traffic, the economy in terms of, low season, slow season, so forth and so on, what creates this, and then the type of people, demographic, so which is pretty good. So I learned a lot through that. And then, so I was trying to figure out, why was there the Strip and there was the downtown Vegas, right? And how like they didn't talk, right? So like there was no crossover, which allowed like guys from like, or artists from like downtown to sort of cross over into the main strip, because the main strip is considered like, that's for this the pop, that's for the commercial, and then the downtown is considered real, and which is for the real locals and so forth and so on. Right? We don't mess around over there because that's just pop. We stay here, this is for the locals, right? But I also realized that there wasn't a lot of cross flow of energies between bordering states, because Vegas was 4 hours away. Utah or Arizona, there wasn't really going on much right there, and that's about 2 hours away and so forth and so on. But still, it wasn't like when I was living when I was raised and living in New York and New Jersey, where you have that cross flow of influence between New York, New Jersey, New England, Boston, Connecticut, right? And even travels down to the Carolinas, to Virginia, but it sort of crosses over DC. That's why they call DC the bubble. They call it DC the bubble. But once it gets to Baltimore, that's it. The energy crosses over for some reason, then it gets to like Richmond, and it gets down to Virginia Beach, and then the Carolinas, Atlanta, Miami, and then not Orlando here and there, but then down to Miami. So, but again, there was a lot of shared influences between those tri-state areas, right? But unfortunately, there isn't a lot of that going on here in Florida. And so I started putting the dots together again, and it's because Florida is basically like a little island, right? And so when we talk about that cross flow of energy, that gravitational pull, Florida doesn't have it. Now, even though it's isolated, there is a different gravitational pull than to the one that I experienced in Vegas. For some reason, and I think it's because of this, when you're in Florida, so when I was living down south, I never really traveled beyond like West Palm Beach because I just never thought. Because again, I have a wide subconscious lens, meaning that I can feel energies and see what's going on. And I can feel things, right? Even though like I'm not in the city right now, but I can feel, I can sort of have a feel for what's going on. Again, because basically because I drive, like I've said in my previous videos of how to feel energies, you drive around, you get a feel. So then that lays imprints. So you start to get a feel for, okay, this is what's happening around this time. Because again, because we live in our heads as opposed to other people who just what have you. So even my father, prior to him coming to visit me in Tampa last March, he said it was the first time that he actually drove up to Tampa because there was no real reason to come to Tampa. So again, I sort of feel like I'm stuck on an island here, although I love it. I mean, I enjoy the place that I'm here, that I am, but I don't identify with Tampa. But I would recommend it, like I said, to anyone, because there's absolutely nothing wrong. It's even paining me to even have this discussion because again, I'm still trying to figure out what it is that is preventing me from really appreciating Tampa, and to the point where sometimes I feel bad. I'm like, man, like why do I not identify with her, with Tampa? Like why? But I spoke to my daughter, and we'll get into that shortly. So anyway, but in Vegas, okay, even over here in Florida, I feel like I'm on an island. And even now, because I'm older now, I'm getting better at understanding and feeling energies. I feel like I'm stuck on an island versus when I was in Vegas. Let me explain to you the energy. And I think that's what I have to do with the separation of energies. When I was in Vegas, obviously there was a lot of mountains. And I think the mountains have a lot to do with separating energies. Because I live 15 miles outside of the Vegas Strip. Yet, I did not feel the energy of the Vegas Strip. All right? I didn't feel like the hustle and the bustle from that. Like it was the Vegas Strip, 15 miles out, suburbs, right? Obviously rocks and stuff like that. But Aliante, Henderson, North Las Vegas, around that area. Different to DC, right? Where in DC, 10, 15-mile radius outside of DC, you still get that energy. Why? Because most people don't live in DC. They live on the outside. So you get all that energy, again, because things conform. We talked about before, the texturizing conformity. So people know that. The city knows that. So it has to conform itself and texturize itself according to policies, regulations, routes, and everything, because they know that people don't live there. So the energy sort of expands itself. Versus in Vegas, when they say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, it's usually on a strip. Because that saying goes for those who normally travel to vacation or to do weekend trips to Vegas. A lot of them don't venture beyond the Vegas Strip because, again, there's no need to, because they get there, they get a taxi, they're going from club to club, from venue to venue, they're walking, so they don't really need to sort of venture out. So, and there's no business dealings for them outside of that. Occasionally here and there, but for the most part, they're there for that weekend. So again, that energy stays there, and Vegas does a good job in keeping things like this, right? So that the energy doesn't get out. So that, I feel, helped me, okay, as an introvert, as an intuitive, for the reason, or for basically while in Vegas, on a moment's notice, on a Sunday afternoon, I would tell the wife and kids, hey, let's go to Utah, St. George. We would literally drive an hour and 45 minutes because you have the time change. So you have to you travel and go over 2 time zones, Arizona and Utah. Arizona first and then Utah. But so we were 2 hours, I believe, behind, or I think 1 hour behind. And so, or 2 hours, I'm sorry, 2 hours central. And so we would be like, all right, it's 5 o'clock now. By the time we get there, it's going to be 7. So we're going to only have an hour before we eat at Chacorama. So we would fly down there, have dinner. And once we got there, we basically just enjoyed the landscape, the Rocky Mountain landscape. And for me, I love scenic views. So ever since I was a kid, I just love scenic views. And that's one of the things that I miss, when it comes to mountains. Like there's something about the mountainous terrain. I really enjoy just looking out into the cities and just seeing the lights, right? And there's a sense of peace, sense of calm. There's nothing like leaving IKEA and just coming out to a frame of mountains, right? It's like, wow. Again, I think it just really does something to your psyche. Coming out of the movie theater and just seeing mountains. And so we would do that. And it was nothing to us because of that gravitational pull. We would take trips to Arizona. We would take trips to Utah, right? To Phoenix. We went to Colorado. We went to California. For California, we left one morning at 6. Got to California around 11. Sorry, we left Vegas at 6. We got to California at 11. Went to the beach around like 1 p.m. We left the beach around like 5. Went to go have dinner, and at 7 we're on the road, and we're back home by midnight, right? Work the next day. But again, that kind of gravitational pull does that. You see what I'm saying to you? Here in Tampa, I'm still trying to figure out what it is about Tampa that I just can't relate to. Again, it has nothing to do with the sensory. It has nothing to do with the sun, with the beaches, with the mosquitoes, with the traffic. I mean, those are all low-hanging fruit. Because again, for me, as an intuitive, those are low-hanging fruit because I adapt well. I'm pretty good at adapting. I adapted to the Vegas heat. I adapted even to the mosquitoes. Yeah, they're wretched, but it is what it is. But I also sense that there is no separation here in Tampa in comparison to Jacksonville. Because Jacksonville, when you drive there, I drove there for the first time a couple weeks back, and I was amazed by the separation. Like you go there, you feel like it's a city, right? And then just 15 miles out of the city, or even less than that, you have like the town plazas with the malls and everything else in the urban area. But again, that separation. So you don't really understand. You don't really see that like you can see what's going on, but you don't really feel the difference because everything is so separated. It's not like all clumped together. Whereas here, you go to the city downtown, but 10 minutes, 15 minutes out, you have the mall. But again, it's the same landscape. There isn't really that much of a change. You know what I'm saying to you? You're surrounded by water because you're by the bay, If you go to Riverview, fine. It's okay, but when you go out to Riverview, then you're so far removed from the actual city itself. So it's like, it's whatever. You know what I'm saying to you? St. Petersburg, Clearwater, again. I just have a thing where it's like, it's just, I need separation. I cannot be in a place. And I think for us, we talked about that before in terms of change. We need change. So even last night, we drove to Orlando. And I just decided, let's go to Orlando. 6 o'clock, we left Tampa. We got to Orlando around 7:42, almost 8. Drove around downtown, whatever. Again, you know, when you go to Orlando, it's for what? It's for the Disney World. It's for this. Okay, because you have like, it's like a destination, right? Get there, then we went to go eat. After we go eat normally, right? And this is how I can tell. This is how I can tell when I'm somewhere and I really have that sense of well-being. It's usually when I come out of a restaurant, or let's say I've had a couple of drinks and I'm standing outside, and then you just look up in the air, and then you get like an overly sense of well-being, like, wow, I'm in this new place. Like, you can really feel it. And I haven't experienced it here. Went to Orlando, and when we came back last night, it was like what? Close to midnight. No, we got back around 11:30. My bad, because we left around 10. So we got back around 11:30, and around like 12:30, I'm in bed with the wife, and I asked her. I said, "Why is it that we drove to Orlando and back, and it just doesn't feel like anything changed?" Because even she mentioned the fact that we're in Orlando, but we just feel like we're just in Tampa. Like, there's nothing real different. You know what I'm saying to you? Whereas going from like Vegas to California to Phoenix to Utah, like, there was change. You know, yes, you can say that we can leave here from Tampa and go up to Atlanta, and there's change, of course. You know, matter of fact, I love Atlanta. I had to get my mountains fixed. And when I tell you I got my mountains fixed, so you show you a couple of pictures here. I mean, bro, like when I say, but unfortunately, it's just a long drive. It's like 6-7 hours, you know? But again, here's the thing though. And again, this is a working theory or some profound thoughts and ideas that I'm having. It's that when I was in Vegas, like, there was this gravitational pull. California said, come to us, come. And like, you were so excited to drive there. And then, I mean, everything was just so cool about the drive, even though you were driving through a desert. But there was just something about just a sense of peace, sense of tranquility, just something about it. And so you got to California, and it was just a new place. You were like, wow, you know, it's just like, yeah, you know. And it's the same feeling that I experienced when I went to Atlanta. I was like, oh, wow, you know, it's great, you know, great contrast, whatever. But it's one of those places where it's like, I want to go again. But there isn't that gravitational pull that makes me want to. But Jacksonville gives me that. Like, I want to go back to Jacksonville again. I want to go experience Jacksonville again for some reason. Like, it's giving me, because I guess it's a little closer. But Atlanta, I wish Atlanta was closer. Because for some reason, that 7-hour drive, I think it's almost close to 8. But I think it's, especially with the stopping and the kids and all that stuff. But for some reason, driving 6 hours to Phoenix was like nothing. Like, we did it often. Like, it was cool. And I don't know. It was just different. But let me see if I'm forgetting anything. If I'm No. So yeah. So as far as Tampa's concerned, there's nothing wrong with Tampa. Vegas, there was absolutely nothing wrong with that as well. So if I had to tell you the differences, or what's the differences for me, it's that living in Vegas, there was a sense of tranquility. Even though, yeah, like it sucked, like it was just rocks. But there was, again, for an introvert, for me, I was at peace. Like there was a sense of peace that I have never felt anywhere else in my entire life. You see what I'm saying to you? Versus here in Tampa, I feel unsettled. I feel like I want to leave already. Like I feel like this place is not for me. Even though there's absolutely nothing wrong with this place. The novelty has ran out. And I feel so bad because I'm like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Because again, don't get me wrong. When it came to DC, I was bad mouthing DC. I'm still bad mouthing DC. Everyone, the only people who enjoy DC are the people who thrive in DC in terms of those who have that personality for DC. But for me, I don't have the personality for DC at all. But I really enjoyed Vegas. I really, and it's so centralized. It was perfect. And I think I would enjoy Colorado as well. And here's I think the last thing I'm going to say. It's an identity. Because again, as I get older, I start to understand and make connections and better understand energies. Because again, before it was up until my mid-30s and even last year or a couple of years ago that I understood, the necessity for cross-flow energies between border and states, or understanding that dynamic. Now I'm also understanding the need, or my need for that, but also the identity. So even if I was in Milwaukee, or if I was in Alabama, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter that there wasn't a big, great city, or that there wasn't anything to do. It's an identity thing. It's like once you have an identity, once you are established, you sort of now tend to gravitate and to enjoy, right, and experience the identity of that particular place. You see what I'm saying to you? Like when you're in Alabama, it's like you feel, man, I'm in Alabama. When you're in Texas, even though Texas was weird in terms of whatever, but you still respected it because it was Texas. Like, dude, like you can't mess with Texas. Now, depending on what part of Texas, like San Antonio versus Austin, Houston, Dallas. You see what I'm saying to you? But still, nonetheless, you know that you are in Texas, so you respect it. Miami, you know you're in Miami, you respect it. New York, you know you're in New York. Atlanta, you know you're in Atlanta. Chicago, you know you're in Chicago. Orlando, you know you're in Orlando because Disney World, right? So that's pretty much it. But in Tampa, again, because everyone says there's snowbirds, people not from here, everyone's from everywhere else. So it's kind of hard, and I guess maybe that's part of the reasons why, as you get older, you need a bit more structure, a little bit more identity, a little bit more collectiveness. You know what I'm saying to you? Sort of running around wild and so forth and so on. You want to be able to put your finger on things and be able to identify positively. And that's my main issue with Tampa. Vegas, I was able to. It wasn't about the strip. Strip was right there. I could go down there anytime. It was a pleasure, just randomly, just going down there. But it was also a pleasure driving an hour to Mount Charleston, Mount Charles. Oh, yeah, Mount Charleston. Wow, whatever. But yeah, just going up there, overlooking the scenery, overlooking the desert, scenic view, just driving 7,000 feet up, being in the snow. I mean, it was just beautiful. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. Yeah, Mount Charleston. Um, so it'd be 80 degrees down, it'd be 50 degrees, 48 degrees, Mount Charleston, right, at night. It was beautiful. Hour away, going to the Hoover Dam, which was 45 minutes away. You know what I'm saying to you? St. George Mead, sorry, St. George, Salt Lake City, just a few hours away, 3 hours away. It was beautiful. But Tampa just doesn't do it for me, you know. But again, I recommend it, you know, for most people. Again, because we have our own issues, right? As introverts, it's our own issues. It's our own dealings that we have to deal with. So again, that's why I said in the beginning, this has nothing to do with sensors. It has nothing to do with bugs, traffic, schools, beach, weather, hurricanes, none of that stuff. It's just more in terms of energy and understanding, like, you know. So again, just if you move to Tampa, you'll have to deal with that, especially coming from Vegas to Tampa. If you're going from Tampa to the West Coast, know that you'll be in that particular, you know, vibe. Now, as far as people are concerned, let me just finish off with this. As far as people are concerned, I would say, again, low-hanging fruit, but sensory people, they always deal, for some reason, the sensory types, they always have a hard time with people. Oh, people are rude. People are that. People are rude everywhere. But I get it. Don't get me wrong. I get it. I'm not dismissing that. But again, I acclimate. That's the difference for me. So I don't have a problem with rude people. I don't have a problem with drivers. I don't have a problem with what have you. I mean, you sort of like learn to adapt, and it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me financially. It doesn't affect, except for Miami. Because when I was in Miami, you always feel like the customer service is so horrendous. You always feel like you're about to get got. You always feel like you're being taken advantage of. But as far as people are concerned, yeah, like people, you can't really trust people. For me, like they're not really. They say one thing, and Florida seems to be the same way. In terms of even when just dealing with people on Craigslist or WhatsApp, it's like people will tell you that, oh yeah, I'm interested in something, and then they'll never show up. You call for service, they won't show up. Then they'll call back 2 days later. Hey, you know, I'm here for that repair. Dude, that was 2 days ago. What are you talking about? Happened to me in Miami. Happens here. So I think it's a Florida thing. But I would say, though, as far as diversity is concerned, there are a lot. If you're Caribbean, you would feel, I would say you would have to go a little bit more down south, because here Tampa seems to be very segregated in terms of white, black. It doesn't seem to be very diverse at all, except in the Riverview, Brandon areas. But Tampa, Clearwater, St. Pete, you have a lot of hipsters, a lot of preppy, a lot of West Palm Beach, Boca type of folks, you know. Southeast LA types, if you will. But for the most part, they're kind. I don't have a problem with customer service. I don't have a problem with personality. Everyone seems to be actually pretty cool. Vegas, same thing. On the contrary to Miami or DC, Vegas people are very friendly. Hospitality is awesome. There's, again, not so much diversity. There's black, white, and Mexican for the most part, but everyone's well integrated. Take that for what you will, but everyone is well integrated in terms of the American economy, American culture. Take it how you want, but everyone's well integrated. And I don't know. I really enjoyed it. As far as safety is concerned, I feel safe, everywhere. Again, it's one of those sensory things. I used to be a police officer. So, you know what I'm saying to you? So for me, it's like, I look at things differently. Not to say that I'm not concerned about safety. Again, on the contrary, I look at things differently. So I do the things necessary. I'm always vigilant and so forth and so on. So, and I put myself in situations. But then again, not everyone has that opportunity to do so. But again, I mean, if you're gonna live in an area where you find that there's a lot of crime, then you may have to think twice about it. But generally speaking, I don't find that there's a lot of crime. I don't see it. It's not, so evident to me as it was, let's say, like in Miami or New York. You know what I'm saying to you? Or even like DC, the heart of DC. But when I was living in like Northern Virginia, I didn't really see it as much. So, I mean, it was pretty much safe for the most part. But I'm not going to talk about the weather. I'm not going to talk about the traffic. So, I think that's about it. It's about 51 minutes. So, hope you really enjoyed it. Hope you got a lot out of this, other than, the three big ones of weather, traffic, and bugs. So, but anyway, Johnny Fontana, Real World NF Scorpio, we out.